And when I think about alignment, right, I think about when, one of the only Black associates at the firm come to me and say, as I'm leaving, you were one of the most important mentors I had here, right? Like that is when I feel like I'm in alignment with the work.
In this episode of The Invisibles, Bendita, Yakiri, and I are talking about career detours and dreams, the pivots, pauses, reinventions, and risks that shaped us along the way. But this conversation isn't just about work. It's about identity, purpose, courage, and what happens when we allow ourselves to dream again, even after experiencing detours that we never planned for, unexpected opportunities, disappointments, responsibilities, losses, and moments that forced us to rethink everything we thought we knew about ourselves. Sometimes the very thing that felt like a setback becomes the doorway to something more aligned, more meaningful, and more fully ours. Today, I'm going to talk with Yakiri and Bendita about career dreams and detours. So thank you both for being here today. I am so excited to kick off this conversation. All of us together, separately, we've had this conversation a lot, particularly as of late. So I'll start with asking you both, what did you want to be when you were younger, and how close did you get to doing that?
Thanks for allowing me to be here with you both. I had a lot of dreams when I was younger, some of which I fulfilled, and others that I didn't. I wanted to be a fly girl from In Living Color. I wanted to be a pediatric neurosurgeon when I was 12 because I thought it sounded really smart. But after that, I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. And I probably got closest to that, although split in two different directions, a lawyer, development finance, and then engaging in the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so from that sense, I think I accomplished it, but I've come to learn over time that I'm a multi-potentialite. And so I really think that the best is yet to come. I think there's more to come. I think I will have at least two or three more careers in me.
So when I was a kid, I had this little notebook I kept and I just took it with me everywhere. And I wanted to be a fashion designer for a very long time. I
Mm.
wish I could find this book. It was so cute with all these outfits.
Oh
Then
my gosh,
I was
Yakiri, we're like the same person. I did the same thing.
I'm sure my mom has it in a box somewhere. Then I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. I was very, very serious, and I've always been interested in what's going on in people's brains and what makes them tick. And my family convinced me that I should be a judge, right? But I think that was more about my attitude and how I handled myself. So there were lots of different aspects of my identity in those spaces. And I ended up in law firms doing, and I studied organizational psychology and got my master's there. So it kind of blended. I'm still looking for that creative piece, though. Maybe that's going to be one of my next careers.
Okay. So you guys have kind of gotten close to what you imagined. And, I think, as I said, I wanted to be a fashion designer. That was just my dream. And I too had these notebooks. I had mapped out like what my wedding dress was going to look like and my bridesmaids' dresses, the color scheme. Then, I distinctly remember one day being asked, "Oh, so you want to be a basket weaver?" And I was like, "Well, no, I want to be a fashion designer." And that derailed that whole dream. And then I got convinced that I was supposed to be a lawyer. But I think the biggest thing was I wanted to be creative. And I have had the opportunity, particularly now, to explore that creativity. And I have been creative in the ways that I've created my career. But now it's really sort of being creative and sort of how I execute, and I'm excited about that. I guess I kind of led into our next question about what dream did you let go of and what replaced it?
Oh, it's interesting because I did want to be a lawyer. I became a lawyer. I was great at it. And then it was something that I decided to let go of because life events got in the way.
Mhm.
Unexpected things happened. And I just decided my brain doesn't work best this way anymore. Let me go do something else. But in thinking about my dreams, I think at least since then, I've thought less about I want to do this particular job and more about this is the way I want to work. This is the kind of impact I want to have. This is the way I want my life to be set up. So I'm no longer kind of doing what we do as children and saying I want to be a nurse or a business person or an engineer, and instead saying, I like to teach and train people. These are the problems I like to confront. So let me engage in work. And that can mean lots and lots of different things, which opens the world up to plenty of options and thinking about how I might progress my career or what I choose to do with that time.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't think I've let go of anything. It's just evolved, right? Like for me, it's definitely that advocacy piece is important, regardless of where, I end up practicing. So when I think about how I'm advocating in the talent space, right, for those who are marginalized and underrepresented, also thinking about like advocacy in women's health, right?
Mhm.
That's another space where, again, when you look at where the resources are going, where you look at where the access is frankly, both of these things are quite depressing at times. But again, both spaces where I feel like I'm a passionate advocate.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, I think I mean, I obviously let go of being a fashion designer. But I think again, it went back to I needed something where I was able to be creative. And so I've always hung on to that thing. And I also realized that particularly now in reflecting back, when I usually left an opportunity or was unhappy in an opportunity, it was most likely because I wasn't able to be creative or I felt that creativity was significantly stifled. Um, but I have been fortunate to have had a lot of great opportunities that I've developed skills that allow me to now be creative in a way that I probably never would have necessarily imagined, even 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So, um, we've all experienced career changes and unexpected detours in our career. And being DJ, you kind of touched on it a little bit, like having to make life decisions and going in a different direction. And Akira, you and I have talked a lot about sort of this next phase of where we are and how we're, sort of navigating it. So let's talk a little bit about, sort of handling those things.
So September 21st, 2013, I was hostage in a terrorist attack. It was at Westgate Mall. I hadn't lived in Kenya very long. And then I was with a person who I literally just met that morning, a professional connection. And my situation didn't last long, maybe 8 or 9 hours max. However, the impact in terms of what I heard while there, what I witnessed, what I experienced, and literally feeling my brain chemistry change um, really charted a new course for me after I left Kenya. So I learned after I, wandered around kind of Phoenix shoeless with my then girlfriend, soon to be wife, now ex-wife. Um, I realized in getting back to work that my brain didn't quite work the same anymore. Like there was
Mhm.
something that was definitively changed in the way that I engaged with information, the way I wanted to process information. What I felt was worth my time, and time itself being a more pressing instrument. So I learned, for instance, in the law, I think it's very useful to be extremely fact based and sequential. And I learned that I was no longer as sequential. I was a
Mhm.
lot more quadratic, right? I could all of a sudden start making connections between disconnected things or things that didn't seemingly have a natural relationship. I learned that I wasn't as much of a hardcore factual person and instead could rely on my intuition.
Mhm.
Whereas before Nairobi, I didn't really have I didn't understand intuition. I didn't have one. I wasn't necessarily tapped in to my physical body because all of my intelligences were driven from an intellectual space. And I don't know how that developed in that moment, but right away, all of a sudden, I just knew things. And sometimes I just know things now, or I'll just see things. And so I've learned, even though it was scary at first, to trust those as legitimate sources of information. But what that meant was, if a partner wanted me to, lead a negotiation on the basis of a term sheet or a set of facts, that I wasn't actually that concerned about the set of facts. I was concerned about what I know, right? And some of that goes into my own semi-narcissistic sense of hubris that I have, my own kind of sense of self. Like, don't ask me any questions, I know what I'm talking about. But I really dug into a lot of that, and that shows up a lot in the context of my daily work in my life. This sense of I already know, and not necessarily in always in kind of an uppity self-righteous way, but I just know. There's some things that I just know. And I can't point to the sheet of paper. I don't remember what fact or what book it came from, but I know. And there's nothing in me that you tell me that I don't know it. And that doesn't work well as a lawyer.
Yeah.
It doesn't work well at all as a lawyer. It's much better in all of the other things that I've been much more engaged with since coaching, uh, educating people, crisis management as art, not a science. So I became more of a art person and not a
Mhm.
science in the way that I needed to execute work.
I just have to say that it's not every day someone starts out with how something has changed them and they say, I was in a hostage situation. And you just talk about it like, and now granted, I have been around you, I know the story, but I want to take a moment to recognize that, like, you know, one of the through lines in a lot of the conversations in this podcast are about pivotal moments in life that make us reprioritize what is truly important and what really matters. And some moments are more intense than others. But I just, I think it's worth just noting, like, you know, that is a moment that can change your entire color of everything. And I appreciate the ways in which, it does make you dive deeper, which then makes the people around you dive deeper, and be more intentional. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to kind of note that because it's a significant moment. Yeah, Carrie, what about you?
Yeah, and on that, Bandita, this idea of honoring your intuition, I think is
Hmm.
super, super, super important because oftentimes when you've pursued higher education, you're in an environment that rewards the intellectual, you're in an environment that, if it's not documented, it didn't happen type of thing. It's very easy to let go of that intuition and almost to a
Hmm.
point where you are severing that part of you if you're someone who is intuitive, right? So I feel like that's an important piece to touch on. For me, I've had a number of shifts or those pivotal moments. But currently, it's, my body, right? Like if you ignore what your body is telling you for long enough, your body will be like, sit your ass down, whether you like it or not,
Preach.
right? So I've
Mhm.
had to sit down. I'd had some mounting health issues for a number of years, that impacted me both professionally, personally, like really I'm thinking about one of those pivotal moments, right? Where I was pregnant and then at 6 months lost my first son
Mm.
before I had Samuel. So it's that all of it came to a head most recently. And for the first time, I decided to put my health first, right? And really say, okay, this is what I need to focus on at this time. And doing that in your 40s, right, when you're at a certain place in your career, can be really challenging, right? It's this place where a lot of these transitions, right? They stir up a whole lot of emotion. It's, this grief for what you thought was going to happen, fear for the uncertainty. But, and it feels like there's been an evolution now to excitement about what can be and what's possible. So I really through this period have learned to trust that intuition, trust and honor that data of emotions and seeing emotions as data to signal me or signal to me like what's next and what I want to move towards. Um, so that th I'm living in this pivotal shift right now.
Mm.
I can't agree with you more on the trusting your intuition. I mean, I've been in work situations where I knew like day three, I'm like, I don't know if this is the right. This is not my place. These are not my people. I don't know that I'm going to be able to really sort of be my best self in this environment.
Mhm.
And I talked myself, sort of out of it, like, oh, it's just nerves. You're in a new place. You don't know, blah blah blah. But I always sort of come back to, nope, I was right, and it's there's something to be said about really, I think you nailed it when you said, Yakiri, your gut, your intuition is data. It is a form of data, and we should not discount that because it's not on a piece of paper or it can't be backed up by, five, six, seven particular concrete facts. You just know. And I do believe that is very serious. While we're talking about detours, um, let's also talk about like when you felt most aligned in your career, and how that felt most aligned with who you are. And have you met that yet? Have you been there yet?
I do in part of my work. So as Kia knows, I've got 16 jobs.
She
Um,
does.
and
We all know that, Bandita.
I periodically I let some go. But and so I do, for me to feel that way is a requirement, right? I need to feel in flow. I want to feel orgasmic, climactic, alive, right? Like for me, my values are significance, and vitality. And the vitality portion is incredibly important to me. Like I want to feel alive. I want to make others feel alive, and I want to make meaning and excuse me and to have kind of meaning in everything that I do. And so being alive and giving life is a core part of who I am, and it's really hard. One of the things that I've known over the course of my life, but has become very urgent over the last 5 to 7 years, is the unwillingness to not have 100% of what I want. And it
Mm.
feels unrealistic. Like we know all of the life constraints, right? And so I just try to figure out what levers do I need to pull to make sure that that's a reality. And sometimes that means I got to have 16 jobs because there's the job that pays the bills. And then there's the job that feeds my intellectual side, the job that feeds my nerdy side, the job that feels my creative side, my black side, my queer side, right? And so all of these roles have like give me something different. And when I can figure out how to infuse more of me into kind of one thing and color, so that's when I let other things go. But I think in particular for this year, it's really been the kind of group executive coaching slash advising space.
Mhm.
Um, I was called earlier this year, um, one executive team's favorite member of their kitchen cabinet. And so I need to do something with that because that highly resonated with me. I ain't cooking in the kitchen, but something's getting cooked. And it
As the young kids say, maybe you are cooking in the kitchen.
somebody else is
You
cooking for me.
cooking.
I'm drinking
Maybe
I'm
you're the
drinking
head
espresso.
chef. You're the
I'm
head
drinking
Yeah.
chef.
espresso martinis while somebody else is cooking for me, making comments and insights and things. And so I've been thinking a lot about the hyper flow state that I'm in when I'm working with those teams. And as a key point where I have zero deliverables, these people expect nothing from me except for me to bring whatever wisdom, education, experience, thoughts, quirkiness, whatever it is that I have, they just want me to bring it and talk to them. And so this has become my recent dream, which is to go talk to people and not have to do anything. Like I don't want to have to deliver anything. I don't want to, I want to have all the authority with no responsibility. This is my current dream. And that's what I'm currently working toward.
Bendita, I mean, I think I've told you both this story about how I was in a meeting that these folks had asked for. So I set up the meeting,
Mhm.
and two of the main people walk in, not a notebook, not a pen, nothing. And they walk in and sit down and they're like, so what is this meeting about? And I was like, you know what?
Yep.
When I grow up,
Yep.
I want to be able to just walk in a room with no pen, no notebook. I just walk in and I just tell you all the things and all the ideas and all the what you should do's, and I walk out. No responsibility. I mean, I was like, that is baller status right there.
Except like I never want people to think that I was didn't care enough about them or the
Fair.
space they've created
Totally fair.
to not even know what the meeting is about. I just
Absolutely
don't
right.
want to have to do a ton of preparation and I don't want to have any concrete deliverables and I don't want that there to be other than to just show up and talk some more. I don't want there to be any expectation that I have action items after the meeting. That's my goal in life.
So that's why you were cool with coming on the podcast.
I was cool with coming on the podcast because you are excellent.
Oh my, thank you, my friend. Yeah, Kiri, how about you? When have you felt alignment in what you're doing?
So my career has looked very differently, very
Hmm.
different than Bandita's, I should say. I feel like I should have had more jobs to fill different needs, just different aspirations, and I didn't, right? So
Mm.
that's the other piece, right? Like, what do you do when you've put all your eggs in one basket, or what do
Hmm.
you do when really spent your time, quote unquote, climbing that corporate ladder? Because I mean, for me, being first gen, um, and my parents immigrated from the Dominican Republic, it was very much like you stay at a job 20, 30 years, right? Generationally too, right? If that were an option, right? Like that was something to be proud of, to have accomplished. I think what I'm learning about my career is, it's going to operate in seasons and there are going to be different elements that are going to fulfill me as I, move throughout my career. And when I think about alignment, right, I think about when, one of the only Black associates at the firm come to me and say, as I'm leaving, you were one of the most important mentors I had here,
Mm. Mm.
right? Like that is when I feel like I'm in alignment with the work. When it's really one-on-one, when I feel I've made a difference and then that person pays it forward, right? Like I'll never know how that conversation or that interaction impacted this individual to then impact others. So that's for me what it feels like to, or what it looks like to, be in alignment with the work, with, what I want, how I want to show up and what my talents look like in this space.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think, when you feel like you've actually accomplished something, that's a period or a space in which for me, alignment happens. I think honestly, like I think I felt most in alignment with who I am most recently, even though I've probably worked harder, in the last in sort of setting up and establishing, my business and launching some of these creative endeavors that I've long since had sort of buried in the back, but wasn't able to focus on. Because similar to what you're saying, Yakiri, I was sort of like, I'm on this track and I'm doing this thing. And the idea of trying to do multiple things at one time, given how much one thing took, just was like unfathomable, right? But even when the days are long and I'm like, oh God, I still have this feeling of like, ooh, like, yeah, that was a lot, but man, do I feel like I've actually accomplished something or, it's sort of, I'm in that flow. I feel like it is where I'm supposed to be. And, I am hopeful and prayerful that, all of it will become very apparent and clear. It is very apparent and clear to me, and I guess ultimately that's what matters, but I also need to be able to pay bills, so that matters too. Um, yeah, Carrie, I'm gonna turn this to you because you and I have talked about this a lot. Managing ambition without burning out. And I don't think I've necessarily figured that piece out yet. The only thing I'll say is I think when you're doing something that you truly love, it doesn't feel, I can't imagine feeling burned out at this point, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and even if it's something that you love, sometimes clients will do
Mm,
their thing,
mm,
and when you've committed to a lot of different projects, I mean, I would imagine you'd likely burn out as well if you don't have, rituals in place, I think, to protect you from burnout.
mhm,
I've also been thinking about this idea, how we think about stress, whether it's a client, whether it's, from your day job, whether it's the bills, whatever it is. Um, but with stress, if you're not almost like metabolizing it
mm,
and dealing with it, or in some way, shape, or form, digesting it, processing it, you will be burnt out at some point, right? Because you've done nothing to take care of it as it's mounting.
mm,
So getting to this place where you know yourself enough to really understand what alleviates, what addresses some of this stress. And obviously it's going to look different depending on, who you have in your support system, who you have in your community, what resources you have, what you have access to, etc. But understanding and knowing what those stress releasers are and
mhm,
incorporating a ritual where you again ensure that you make time for yourself, whatever that looks like, is going to be extremely important. Because if, whether again it's clients or your corporate work, burnout is inevitable if you are someone who has a problem saying no. And if you're a
mhm.
person who really has been brought up to, and I struggle with this, with the idea of, productivity being a significant source of your self-worth, right? I think
Yes.
to your earlier point, like people who tend to be ambitious tend to, complete that with, again, if I'm not productive, what does this mean for me? Or the
Yeah.
idea of earning rest, right? Did I produce enough? Did I do enough to earn rest? So this is all speaking to a mindset as well. Right? Because if you're not taking care of that mindset, if you're not incorporating those rituals, if you're not really, again, kind of metabolizing that stress, you will get burned out.
Yeah, you and I have talked a lot about equating value with productivity. And, it's like you have to earn rest as opposed to realizing that rest is necessitated in order for you to be productive. And, I think in another podcast episode, we talk a lot about how it's almost like this cultural, um, we've inherited this, particularly Black people, but we've inherited this from back in the slave days. Like your value is how much you produced. And that is something that our ancestral sort of inheritance is sort of in our DNA. It's like we have to work, we have to do all the things so that we can show people that we are of value or invaluable or add value or whatever the word you want to insert in order to sort of be worthy of recognition, be worthy of a rest, be worthy of insert whatever the thing is, but you have to show this productivity. And, I think it's something that you almost have to deprogram yourself from having that mentality and realizing like rest is key. Being able to just be is okay. Um, and allow yourself that so that you do not find yourself in this burnout state. And boundaries are huge. And from somebody who, you know, when you're thinking about starting a business or, doing something completely different and you don't want to say no to anything because you're like, that could be the thing that is the next opportunity, or that could be the thing that pushes me over into this, or, I don't want people to think like, oh, I guess she doesn't need work, but you're like, and so you're afraid to say no. But at the same time, you also realize there's only 24 hours in the day and you cannot do all of it. You cannot use all 24 hours in a wake state, like not in a productive wake state anyway.
Um, I don't really burn out.
Hmm.
I'm a little bit of a machine, and I don't say that with pride, just acknowledgement. And part of it is because of this ruthless insistence that I'm always doing something that I really love to do. But as Yakiri mentioned, like I can love red velvet cake all I want, but too much cake is too much cake, and eventually you get sick. Right. And
Hmm.
so just because you love it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you in any amount or quantity. However, I think all of this starts with really knowing yourself.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I'm very grateful for is I am very well aware of my many strengths and I am very well aware of my many failings. And I know what I'm not great at. I, sometimes try to work on some of those things, but I'm not that stressed out about what I'm not good at. I dig into the stuff that I love, right? I dig into where I feel a natural synergy and I try to organize my life in that way so that I have less friction. And so, because I am very well aware that I'm not good at this, I'm not putting up with this X, Y, and Z. And for what I've also learned is when you're in a corporate environment or any environment, when you start up front to experience limits, boundaries, rules that do not align with who you are, you either need to cut quick or
Hmm.
you need to establish your own boundaries up front. Otherwise, it's near impossible to get out of that. And so I'm very good in the context of my learning slash ramp up phase in any project, board, organization role. Of the second I start hitting things that I'm like, oh, that's going to be an energy suck.
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't work that way. But I
Hmm.
found myself to be equally effective or even more effective by working this way. How
Hmm.
willing are you to try this? Like you
Hmm.
hired me for a reason because you're hiring a person that you don't already have. Right.
Hmm.
And so how willing are you to try allowing me to do things my way? And most of the time, especially early on, people are okay with that so long as I demonstrate myself to be willing to learn and understand who they are. And I think, and it feels like I want to be a part of who they are and not to supplant who they are. But I try to nip that stuff in the bud really early because creating challenges in my life and creating that friction that drains more energy is not what I'm trying to do.
Right.
And when I don't get it right, I quit. I joined a board in January. I tested it out, had some conversations, tried to make it work because I care deeply for the organization. And after having hit my head up against a wall for 90 days, I said, you know what? This ain't
It's
working
not
out.
gonna,
So
yeah.
I quit.
Yeah. I think I think one thing of context in that, Vendita, is the fact that you are a seasoned professional. You have a lot of experience. You are hired, you have been hired and or asked to serve given your expertise and in-depth knowledge about, particular things. And so you have that ability to sort of dictate, like, okay, here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to do it this way. You can negotiate. And I think that's something that comes over time. That's not something, although I feel like folk walk in now, fresh out of wherever, and they telling people how they're going to work and when they're going to work. And on some level, that is really good to sort of set expectations and boundaries very early on in your career. Um, and I applaud that. It's some of the freedoms that I think people expect without having demonstrated any real knowledge, in an environment where I think we run into some challenges. But be that as it may, I just think it's important that some of this comes from a place of knowing yourself, knowing the value that you bring, which we've all talked about, sort of understanding your worth and what you have to offer, and being able to demonstrate that, you're gonna get what you've asked of me, but I also need you to provide me with the environment in which to be able to provide this to you. And I think that's super important as you're, growing your career. What's one career decision that required courage over comfort?
I was at Goldman for 16 months and I just quit.
Because it didn't work for
It
you.
wasn't aligning with my spirit. And I recognized that 12 months at Goldman was all I needed for it to do what I needed it to do for the rest of my life. I did not love the way that teams communicated. I didn't resonate with the work. I think the work was interesting. However, uh, I thought private wealth, frankly, was going to be different than what it was. And being a person whose family lived for years under what I personally think are usurious interest rates because they were Black in a white neighborhood, I was having a little bit of cognitive dissonance with being one of the first three lawyers to set up a private lending arm for this bank for very, very wealthy people at very, very, very low interest rates.
Mm.
And so that dissonance for me meant that it wasn't going to work out. And what happened were literally the day that I called my boss to quit, I got three phone calls later that afternoon that told me the path that I was supposed to be on. One was from a woman who knew that I had done a lot of the business professional diversity training at one of my first law firms while I was still an associate there. And she said, "Do you remember that training you gave 3 years ago? Do you want to do more of that?" And then there were two other people who were like, "You did some coaching for us." I've been a coach for about 22, 23 years now. You did some coaching for us related to diversity and other things. Are you still doing that? What are you doing now? Would you? And I said, "Of course I can do that. Of course I'm doing that." Even
Mhm.
though what I was actually doing was quitting a different job. And so I knew that was the path I was supposed to go on, and I followed it. And I think paying attention to the signs when they appear is really important. But I didn't allow myself to engage in that dissonance for too long. I also knew that dissonance existed at around month 3 or 4. However, I had a bunch of goals at the same time, which was if I'm going to make this career move, I need it to be worth it. And I decided that, 12 to 18 months was the period of time that it needed to be worth it. And so for me, that 14 to 16 month period of leaving made a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, for me, I think about two times in my career when I chose courage over comfort. First was leaving a firm I had been at for 18 years. It was very comfortable from both a professional and personal um, place because it's almost like these are people and this is an environment. That had seen me, grow up in many
Mhm.
ways in terms of significant life milestones, and that had supported me for a very long time. So leaving that environment where I knew everything, knew everyone, could easily do, my job and responsibilities to pursue something that was different, where I knew I would gain a different skill set, and sort of broaden my experience was certainly I think a time that required courage. And a lot of this courage was also telling my parents, like, oh, yeah, I'm leaving this place, right? From their perspective, it's like, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? Like, why? Why? And then having the same conversation with them most recently when, I left the firm in February. So now, and both times I chose myself in many ways, right? Like now has been the ultimate choose me adventure in that I am spending some time and having a pause and reflecting on what's next, what I want to do. And even during this time, I call it a pause, but I'm still pursuing other passions of mine, in the health and wellness space. Um, but I have a faith that this will all work out, regardless of what I choose. And that goes back to trusting, my intuition and trusting that I will be figure it out and I want to say be divinely guided, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so there is that um the courage obviously required to do a lot of this stuff, the privilege I'll say too, right? Because I am very aware that, when you're looking at the news and seeing how over 300,000 Black women, are no longer employed for a whole host of reasons, right? Whether they're pushed out, whether, they had federal jobs, etc. Um, I'm very much aware that this pause, has been a privilege. And at the same time, there's also that excitement, right, about entrepreneurship and what that looks like, even if you were one of those people who, did a check the box exercise along the way when thinking about your career. So those are two points in my life that
Yeah.
were courageous, I think.
Yeah. I co-sign all of that. I There were two times in my career where I left a job without anything else lined up. Um, you know, I I followed my gut and realized like these were situations that I was not going to come out on top if I kind of just kept going the way I was going. And I in both circumstances, I found that when I was willing to step out on faith, because that's what you're doing when you leave a job with no job, um, it it was sort of like the universe was like, okay, finally, we can bring this to you. Um, and it was literally like with the first time when I had made the decision that I was leaving that employer. I mean, within a week, something else popped. It was similar to what you were saying, Bendita. Somebody reached out and said, "Oh, we're looking for, do you know anyone?" And I was like, "Actually, me." And it was one of the best experiences that I had because I had the opportunity to work with some really great people who, you know, um, have continued to be an important part of my professional and personal life. And then the second time, it was a situation where I had the opportunity to take some time, again, recognizing this privilege of being able to leave a place and have some time to really reflect and be intentional about next steps without worry about, oh, how am I going to make this work and this and that. So I recognize it as, but um, I feel like, and I've said before, you both have heard me say, in the end, I think everything is going to be fine. And if it's not fine, it's not the end. And I'm excited about the future and the prospects and all the things and being able to try things and see if it works. And if it doesn't, reframing, recalibrating, and figuring it out another way. But I think that, this is definitely, um, with the time and experience and age, is also the confidence and wisdom of knowing that the path ahead may not be very clear, but you're going to be fine because you've got all the tools, you've got all the things that will make all of this work really well. One of the things I think we've all sort of expressed, but maybe not specifically said it, was in spaces where we felt unseen, right? There was a disconnect. There was something that made us go, this isn't quite it, and I'm not going to be able to be my best. How have you navigated through those circumstances and situations where you've been in spaces where you feel unseen?
I think, and there's a larger theme around chains, right? What's the opposite of a dream, right? It's death, hopelessness, dejection, despondency. And there was a mention of parents who have dreams that are different than yours, or who think that your having attained a particular degree means you're chained to a particular career, or that because somebody hired you to do X, it means you have to do X, or just because somebody doesn't recognize you, it doesn't mean that you can't be recognized. And so I think one of the difficult things about being a person in my orbit, I think, is that I have a very, very, very probably too strong personal responsibility orientation.
Mm,
I believe that most people that I encounter that don't need kind of trauma therapy are whole humans who are creative, who have the ability to sort out their circumstances.
mm,
I believe that to my core. And so my belief is that if you are in an organization and you are not seen, then you find a way to be seen. Now, is that oh does that oh there are a lot of permutations and potentially limitations to this, right? And it all presumes that you will get seen the way that you want to be seen, and that's another question for oneself. But I think you find a way to either be seen, or you assert your value, or you leave.
mhm.
And I don't actually believe in existing in a permanent state of not, like, I don't know how not to have people recognize that I'm great, because I get off on it. Like, and I need that get off feel.
I agree. I mean, with the Bandita had talked about time and energy, like expending energy to be seen in an
Mhm.
environment that will never see you is a futile exercise, right? Like this is redirection. And if you're listening, because we keep talking about intuition, then you will understand the messaging,
Yeah.
right? And if you're in an environment where you don't feel seen and you've already sought out people with, who you do think see your value and can advocate for you, right? If you don't find that, then yes, it is
Yeah.
time to move on, right? Because you're going to just spend way too much energy to be seen. That's going to detract from your work. That's going to detract from whatever value you're going to bring to this particular organization. And I've seen so many, especially young attorneys, get caught up in that cycle, right?
Yeah.
Because then they're in their heads and all the energy is expended on this partner or this person, like seeing me. It's like
Hmm.
that's not a good use of your time.
Yeah. Not just young attorneys. I see some big partners that, they're, and talk about trying to build allies, right? And they're so busy trying to be seen, they can't really truly be an ally because they're in an environment where they're not truly seen, And so I think that is something that you know, runs the spectrum of seniority. And um, to your point, you can't be your best self if you're constantly in your head about, well, what about this? Do they understand that you're never going to be able to perform. And I will admit that I've been in spaces for far longer than I should have been, when it was very clear that whatever value add I thought I could bring and whatever value add might have been sold as being important, there was not a connection there. And at the end of the day, that's not the way that I want to spend my time, my creativity, and my talent. So I agree, like, you get what you can from the circumstance and then you get out. Um, how has your definition of success evolved? What does success look like? What was one that you had at some point and now where you are now? What does success look like and what does that definition mean for you?
So when I think about success, and certainly when I started my career, it was very simple. Title and pay, right?
Hmm.
It's this like external validation, right? Very much, uh, proving myself in order to attain that title and pay, right? In order to attain the recognition, the team, etc. Um, and it's wild because growing up, um, like I did not know anyone who owned a house. I didn't know anyone who had graduated from university in the US. I didn't know anyone who had made, a significant amount of money. So obviously, attaining some of those things when
Hmm.
I was successful, right? Especially by assessing this against, how I grew up. And once I got to a place where I had attained all of those material things and titles, and I realized I didn't feel fulfilled, right? I didn't
Hmm.
feel happy in that way. Um, I decided to redefine what success looked like, right? Like I've always operated from a place of gratitude.
Hmm.
And I've always recognized, my privilege in being able to attain my education and being able to, again, advance
Hmm.
and achieve, the traditional meaning of success. But now when I think about defining success, and this is something, that's been frankly more recent. The universe has called me back to Dominican Republic, several times throughout the last couple of years. My parents retired, my cousins have kids the same age as my son. So I've been going back a lot. And that has reminded me of like the joys I had as a kid because as a kid, I remember going back every year and spending summers there. My dad worked in a factory. He would save up all his vacation time to be able to like have us go back for a significant amount of time. But, that definition of a success has evolved into um, ways of being creative and spending time how I choose to spend it.
Hmm.
I really think that those individuals who are most successful get to dictate how they spend their time, right?
Yeah.
This idea of you selling your time to, an employer or a client, whatever the case may be, it really reframed how I was thinking about success. So
Yeah.
for me, it's been a more recent evolution.
Yeah. I think you kind of touch on, for me, it's freedom. Success to me now is freedom. It's the freedom to choose how I want to spend my time. And it gives me the freedom to be creative in the ways in which I utilize all that is in me that I have to offer, the talent that I have. And you know, how that freedom comes, that's a whole other conversation. But for me, success is freedom, the freedom to be able to be my best self. and show up as my best self in all the different ways in which allow me to be creative. Bandita, what about you?
Further, my measures of success have changed very much. I want big titles and I want big money. I I think over time, continuing to hone my values has been important. And so ambition used to be a value of mine. It's no longer. Um, I've, growth used to be a value of mine. I think both of those things are still present in my life, but I don't think that those are the ends. And so when I talk about significance and vitality being the difference, making a difference, feeling alive, giving life, I really try to allow that to determine what I choose to do. And rather than think about success as being the outcome, I think about success being my adherence to my values in the process. And
Mm,
I think for the type of work that all of us have done, for a period of time, it's incredibly important. Otherwise, you will, you know, burn the building down, right? Because the
hmm
work we do in diversity and inclusion doesn't necessarily lend itself to our being able to control the outcome.
hmm
And so if I want to be a despondent, angry human being, then I will look at success outcomes. If I want to be a happy, joyful human being that likes what I do every day and continues to show up for this check instead of quiet quitting, I will think about success in the process. And that's how I choose to orient myself. I will say that I'm not a purist in that many people care a lot about how they go about things, how things go, X, Y, and Z. I am a person that at my core believes that I'm always winning. And
I love
so
that.
when others may perceive a failure, I'm like, I'm good. I'm always good. I'm going to be taken care of. And so for me, it's more about the way that I choose to show up and
Hmm
engage and holding myself to that standard that tells me whether or not I've met my objectives rather than I made $10 or I got a promotion. Again, I will never hide the fact that I want all the money and titles in the world. But for me, I don't think about that as the goal. I actually just think that that's just who I am and what I ought to have, right? There's a little
hmm
bit of entitlement there I one day probably should see a therapist about. But I'm more concerned about was I the person that I want to be in every single moment?
Yeah. I will leave this with what advice would you give anyone reinventing themselves mid-career?
Own your story. The story is the most important part, right? And for anybody that's watched a movie or read a novel or has looked at a play that tells a story that they already know in a different way, you know how important a narrative is. And so decide what your narrative is, and you will find the facts to back that thing up. I'm not suggesting that people lie. I am
Hmm
suggesting that people take a detached third party observer toward their set of circumstances, their skills, their attributes, their accomplishments, whether in the professional sphere or otherwise. Look at all that raw material and throw it in the pot, and then see what comes out. Like keep reimagining how all the pieces fit together to lend themselves to a credible story that somebody else could nod their head to about who you are and what that means that you can do. Because I firmly believe, like, I could probably do anything other than, be a surgeon. Um, Nobody wants me to do that. My handshake. Um, Otherwise, I can learn it. And I know enough, have been in enough spaces, have connected with enough human beings that most of whatever is in the universe of things that I want to accomplish, I can probably do. My job is to figure out how to tell the story. So figure out
hmm
what you want, and that's the first thing, and that can be a hard thing, and then figure out how to tell the story based on things that exist about what you can do and how you're going to get there.
I agree. And along those lines is just remaining curious, right? I
Hmm.
think you'll get the clarity you're seeking if you remain curious. Because when you think about these career transitions, it's not just about changing a job, right? It's really, in a lot of ways, seeking realignment with who you're becoming, right? So that's
Hmm.
going to continue to evolve. So as much as it is about what you're leaving behind, it's also about like what you're ready to claim,
Mm.
right? Like what is, again, as Bandita noted, like your story, what's out there in the universe that is yours to claim? Because again, we get caught up in what we're leaving behind. So,
Yes. Yes. I love that. What are you ready to claim? Right. I think so many people walk around like, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do this, I don't want to, but what do you want to do? What do you want? What are you willing to exert yourself toward? Um, and I think that, how open are you? It takes me back to one of my favorite, I love Ted Lasso. I think it came along at a really great time when we were all looking for something positive. And I know some people have feelings one way or the other, but one of the things I loved about Ted Lasso was his the comment, be curious, not judgmental. And as long as you stay curious and willing to learn and, be adventurous, I think life can be so amazingly wonderful and bring so much joy. And I recognize that, joy is relative and everybody has their things and we all have our burdens to bear, but there is joy to be found.
And with that, thank you for spending this time with us. What I hope this conversation reminds you is that there is no single timeline for becoming who you're meant to be. The dream may shift, the path may look nothing like what you imagined, and yes, there may be detours that leave you questioning yourself along the way. But sometimes those unexpected turns are what lead us closer to the life, purpose, and peace we were always searching for. I'm so grateful to everyone who joined us as guests throughout this first season of The Invisibles. What started as conversations about change became something much deeper, an exploration of identity, awakening, healing, relationships, grief, reinvention, and what it means to truly see ourselves again in this season of life. And now we close out season 1. Thank you all for listening, sharing, supporting, and growing with us. This space would not be what it is without all of you. Mark Ferg, thank you for making this podcast sound like I know what I'm doing. You've patiently listened to my vision for each episode and brought it to life. Judah Mapson, thank you for allowing me to say that I have original music. I love a good soundtrack, and you somehow heard what was in my head and turned it into the heartbeat of this podcast. And thank you to Rhonda Shields, our on-set photographer and the MVP of recording days. You captured not just beautiful moments, but you also captured the joy behind this project. Eric Bonstrom, you make every production assistant and craft services team look like the junior varsity squad. You made sure we stayed hydrated, fed, supported, and had everything we needed so that recording days ran smoothly and seamlessly. You're not only my husband, but you're my favorite partner in crime. Thank you, babes. And last but undoubtedly not least, a very special thank you to Dr. Christopher Chauncey Watson for believing in my dream and taking me on this incredible journey. You've held my hand, offered sage advice and counsel, and reminded me to trust myself every step of the way. Together, we've made magic, and I know we're only getting started. So this isn't goodbye. During our summer hiatus, you can follow us on Instagram at the_invisibles_podcast. And The Invisibles will return this fall for season 2 with even more honest conversations, powerful stories, and reminders that no matter where you are on your journey, especially in this middle season of life, you are not alone and you are definitely not invisible here.